It was an ordinary afternoon when the FBI officer decided to make a quick trip to the local department store. The sun was bright, and the streets were buzzing with people running errands, picking up groceries, and finishing last-minute tasks before the evening. She had dressed casually, wearing a simple shirt and jeans, blending in with the crowd, hoping no one would notice her professional background. She wanted nothing more than to move quietly through the store, grab what she needed, and leave without drawing attention. As she entered the store, she immediately noticed the hum of activity. Children ran down the aisles, giggling and pointing at colorful displays, while parents tried to keep up, pushing carts and occasionally stopping to look at sale signs. The smell of freshly baked bread from the in-store bakery mixed with the scent of cleaning products and new merchandise. It was a normal scene, the kind she had seen hundreds of times before, both as a citizen and during her off-duty observations of public spaces for her work. She walked calmly down one aisle, glancing at the items on the shelves. She picked up a few household essentials, placing them in her shopping basket with ease. She was focused on her task, not paying attention to anyone around her. But across the store, two uniformed police officers noticed her. They were not ordinary shoppers themselves. They were patrolling the store looking for suspicious behavior. When their eyes fell on the FBI officer, something about her appearance or perhaps the way she moved caught their attention. Without any legitimate reason, they decided she was suspicious. One of the officers approached her quickly, his face tight with seriousness. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm. "We need to check your bag." She stopped in her tracks, looking at him calmly. "Why?" "I haven't done anything wrong," she replied. Her voice was steady, polite and professional, but she could sense the underlying tension building rapidly. The officer's eyes narrowed, and he gestured toward the back of the store. "We have reason to believe you're attempting to shoplift. Please come with us." The FBI officer raised an eyebrow. She had encountered plenty of situations where people were falsely accused, but this was different. These were uniformed officers, sworn to protect the public, and now they were accusing her based on nothing but prejudice. She held up her hands, showing she was not a threat. "I am not shoplifting," she said. "I am an FBI officer. You can verify my credentials." The officers exchanged a quick glance, their expressions unreadable. One of them scoffed and said, "Credentials don't matter right now. We need to make sure you aren't stealing anything." His tone was dismissive, and it was clear he believed his authority alone justified his actions. The officer felt a rush of frustration, but she kept her composure. She knew that losing her temper would only make the situation worse. The surrounding customers began to notice the confrontation. Some paused mid-shopping, watching the exchange with curiosity and concern. A few whispered to one another, trying to understand what was happening. The atmosphere in the store shifted. The usual background noise of chatter and music faded slightly as the tension grew. People instinctively stepped back, giving the officers space, but their eyes remained fixed on the scene unfolding. She followed the officers reluctantly toward a more secluded part of the store, still insisting on verifying her identity. "I am not going to resist, but I need you to contact your superiors or your dispatch." "You can confirm my identity immediately," she said. Her voice carried authority, calm yet firm. It was a voice that demanded recognition, a voice she had trained herself to use in high-pressure situations. The officers ignored her request, focusing instead on the assumption that she had committed a crime. They were determined to conduct a search despite her protests. She realized that she needed to handle this situation carefully. One wrong move could escalate the incident, possibly endangering her or causing unnecessary confrontation. She reminded herself to stay calm, to use her words wisely, and to maintain a demeanor that reflected her professionalism. As they approached a small, less crowded area near the back of the store, the officers began to prepare for the search. One officer reached for his gloves while the other glanced around to ensure no one was interrupting. The FBI officer noticed their movements and took a deep breath. She knew that at this point the power dynamics were clear, and she needed to assert herself without creating further conflict. "You are about to make a serious mistake," she said quietly but clearly. "I am a federal agent, and falsely accusing me could have serious consequences." The officers paused for a brief moment, but their expressions remained rigid. It was as if they had convinced themselves that their suspicion justified their actions. She continued to speak, explaining calmly that she had not touched anything suspicious and that she had been shopping like any other customer. She emphasized that she had nothing to hide and that she was willing to cooperate, but only through proper verification channels. Meanwhile, some customers had begun to record the incident on their phones. They whispered to each other about the unusual scene, noting the tension in the officer's calm demeanor in contrast to the growing aggression of the two police officers. The presence of witnesses created a subtle pressure, though the officers seemed initially unbothered by it. The store's staff watched from a distance, unsure of how to intervene without escalating the situation further. The FBI officer realized that words alone might not be enough to stop the impending search. She decided to prepare for the moment she would reveal her identity fully, hoping it would end the confrontation before it escalated further. She adjusted her bag slightly, making sure her credentials were accessible but not immediately visible, ready to show them when the moment was right. As the officers closed in, their body language suggested authority and control, but there was an underlying tension in the way they moved. Their steps were slightly hurried, their eyes scanning the area as if expecting interference. The FBI officer remained calm, observing every move, calculating her words and actions carefully. She knew that maintaining composure was essential to diffusing the situation safely. She spoke again, her voice steady, repeating that she had not committed any crime and asking them to contact dispatch. "Please verify my identity before proceeding. It is the law, and it is also the right thing to do," she said. The officers continued to ignore her, their focus fixed on conducting the search. At that moment, she realized how deeply prejudice and assumption could influence behavior, even among those sworn to uphold the law. The tension in the store grew almost palpable. Shoppers continued their activities but with a sense of unease, glancing occasionally toward the scene. A few approached the aisle cautiously, curious but wary. The FBI officer felt the weight of the moment, understanding that she needed to remain firm, professional, and composed. She could not allow fear or anger to guide her actions. She focused on breathing steadily, maintaining eye contact with the officers and speaking clearly and assertively. The two officers positioned themselves, ready to proceed. One officer gestured toward her, indicating that she should step aside. She took a deliberate step, careful to maintain her posture and composure. Her mind was racing, considering every possible outcome, yet her face remained calm. She reminded herself that she had encountered challenging situations before, and the key was to remain in control through calm authority and measured responses. As they prepared for the search, the FBI officer knew the moment to reveal her credentials was imminent. She reached into her bag, feeling the familiar weight of her badge and identification. She understood that once she revealed her status, the dynamic would shift dramatically, and the officer's reaction would reveal the true extent of their prejudice and assumption. She prepared herself mentally, knowing that the next few moments would determine the outcome of this tense encounter. Throughout the ordeal, she kept her tone polite yet firm, emphasizing cooperation but also the need for proper verification. She was careful not to escalate with anger or sarcasm, maintaining a professional and composed demeanor. Her experience had taught her that in such situations, calm authority often spoke louder than any raised voice or aggressive stance. The scene in the store was now charged with tension. Shoppers and staff alike watched, sensing that something significant was unfolding. The officers remained focused on their assumption, but the FBI officer's calm and authoritative presence created an unspoken pressure, making it clear that their actions would have consequences. She was ready to reveal her identity, confident that her professionalism and patience would ultimately bring the situation to a resolution. And so, the ordinary shopping trip that began with nothing more than errands had escalated into a confrontation, fueled by prejudice and assumption. The FBI officer stood calmly, prepared to show that dignity, professionalism, and truth could stand firm against false accusations and bias. The moment of revelation was approaching, and the store, filled with unsuspecting customers, was about to witness a lesson in authority, justice, and the courage to remain composed under pressure. The tension inside the store had grown with every passing second. The FBI officer stood calmly, watching the two police officers as they positioned themselves for a search. Her mind was alert, running through every scenario, but her outward demeanor remained composed. She knew that panicking or raising her voice would only escalate the situation, so she focused on staying calm and measured. The officers, on the other hand, seemed increasingly frustrated. Their initial confidence, fueled by bias and assumption, was starting to waver slightly, though neither admitted it. They kept insisting that she needed to be searched, pointing out invisible signs of suspicion that made no sense. She listened quietly, nodding occasionally, giving them no reason to accuse her, but she remained firm in her refusal to comply without proper verification. Customers nearby began to notice the standoff. Some stepped closer, trying to see what was happening, while others whispered to friends or family. A few brave shoppers started recording with their phones, sensing that something significant was unfolding. The store, once filled with the usual bustle and noise, had become tense and quiet, as if everyone knew they were witnessing an unusual confrontation. The FBI officer decided to take another approach. She spoke in a calm but firm tone, making sure her voice carried authority without anger. "I am asking you once again to verify my identity," she said. "You have no right to accuse me without confirmation. I am not resisting, but I will not submit to a search based on a false assumption." One of the officers stepped forward slightly, raising his voice. "We have reason to suspect theft. You need to cooperate," he said. His words were forceful, but there was a subtle hesitation behind them, a crack in the facade of control. The FBI officer noticed it immediately, recognizing that his confidence was not as strong as it appeared. She continued speaking calmly, her words deliberate and careful. "I understand you are doing your job, but what you are doing right now is wrong. I have done nothing illegal, and you are accusing me based on nothing but assumption. This is not acceptable. Please verify my identity." Her tone was steady, the kind that demanded attention without provoking further aggression. The officers exchanged another glance. One muttered something under his breath, frustration evident in his expression. The FBI officer noticed the subtle shift in their demeanor, and she realized that her calm, assertive approach was beginning to influence them. They had expected compliance and resistance alike, but her composed, professional behavior was unexpected. Meanwhile, the store manager had noticed the growing tension and the recording phones in the crowd. He felt concerned, unsure of how to intervene without making things worse. He approached cautiously, trying to gauge the situation. The FBI officer caught his eye and nodded slightly, indicating that she had the situation under control, but he remained nearby just in case. The officer then decided to reinforce her point with a factual statement. "I am trained to handle high-pressure situations. I'm not a threat. Your actions right now are creating a problem that can escalate unnecessarily. Please do the right thing and verify my credentials." She spoke slowly, giving the officers time to absorb her words. One of the officers gestured toward the store's back room, insisting that she go with them. She complied, moving deliberately and slowly, maintaining eye contact and a steady posture. Her movements were careful and controlled, signaling that she was following their instructions only to the extent that it was safe and reasonable, without conceding to an illegal search. The crowd of shoppers continued to watch, some whispering, others recording quietly. The air felt heavy with tension, and many people could sense the unjust nature of the situation. Some customers looked uncomfortable, realizing that this was more than a simple accusation. It was a display of bias and misuse of authority. Their quiet observations added subtle pressure on the officers, though the men still tried to maintain their composure. The FBI officer's mind was methodical, preparing for the moment she would reveal her badge and credentials. She knew that revealing her identity would immediately change the dynamic, but she also needed to ensure the situation remained under control until that point. Her calm demeanor served as a shield against the officer's aggression and as a signal to the witnesses that she was handling the situation with dignity. As the officers guided her to a more secluded area, she kept speaking, emphasizing the importance of law and proper procedure. "Accusations without evidence are serious. You are obligated to act professionally and legally. I am cooperating to the extent that the law allows, and I expect the same from you." Her words were deliberate, each phrase chosen to assert authority and remind the officers of their responsibilities. The officers hesitated slightly, their movements becoming more rigid and self-conscious. Their bias had been challenged, and the calm, authoritative presence of the FBI officer was now having an effect. They muttered instructions to each other, trying to regain control of the situation. The tension was thick, and the officer's confidence was slowly eroding. The officer continued to assert herself verbally, maintaining a calm but firm tone. Please contact dispatch or your superiors. They can verify who I am immediately. There is no reason for you to continue this confrontation without confirmation. She spoke clearly, making sure her words were audible to the officers and anyone nearby who was paying attention. At that moment, a few employees of the store approached cautiously, sensing that the situation could escalate. They watched silently, unsure whether to intervene or stay back. The officer noticed them but remained focused on the two police officers, her attention unwavering. She understood that controlling her own behavior was the key to preventing further escalation. The officers began to prepare for a search, positioning themselves strategically. The FBI officer observed every movement, calculating her next steps. She knew that the moment to reveal her credentials was approaching, and she needed to ensure that it happened without giving the officers a chance to react negatively. Her mind was sharp, fully aware of the potential risks and outcomes. The store manager, now closer, quietly assessed the situation. He realized that the two officers were acting on bias rather than evidence, and that the confrontation could easily become public if handled poorly. He stayed close, ready to assist if necessary, but he trusted the FBI officer's composure and ability to manage the incident. The officer spoke again, calmly but firmly, reiterating her position. I am not resisting. I am not committing a crime. You have no evidence against me. Please verify my identity and act professionally. Her words were deliberate, meant to assert authority and guide the officers toward the right course of action. The officers paused briefly, glancing at each other. There was a subtle shift in their posture, a sign that they were beginning to feel the weight of the situation. Their initial confidence, built on assumption and bias, was slowly crumbling. The FBI officer noticed this change, but she remained cautious, knowing that their reaction could swing either way. She continued to engage them in calm conversation, pointing out the procedural errors they were making. Accusing someone without verification is not only unprofessional, but it is also illegal. You are obligated to act responsibly. Please do so now before this situation escalates further. Her tone was firm yet composed, signaling that she was in control of herself in the situation. The customers around them watched quietly, some still recording, others whispering to one another. The store had become an unusual mix of tension and curiosity, as people witnessed a confrontation fueled by bias and authority being challenged by calm professionalism. The presence of witnesses seemed to weigh on the officers, though they tried to maintain a facade of control. The officer continued to assert her authority verbally, maintaining a composed stance and steady voice. She emphasized that cooperation did not mean submission to illegal actions. Her words were deliberate, each one calculated to assert her rights while maintaining professionalism and calm. As the officers prepared to proceed, she adjusted her bag slightly, ready to reveal her badge and credentials. She knew that the revelation would instantly change the dynamic, but she also wanted to maintain full control until that moment. Her calm, professional demeanor had already begun to influence the officers, and she planned to use that shift to bring the situation to a safe and proper resolution. The tension in the store was now palpable. Shoppers and staff alike watched, sensing that something significant was unfolding. The officers remained focused on their assumption, but the FBI officer's composed presence was beginning to undermine their authority. She was ready for the next step, confident that her calm and deliberate actions would lead to a resolution that reflected justice and professionalism. The ordinary shopping trip had now evolved into a test of authority, bias, and composure. The FBI officer stood patiently, waiting for the right moment to assert the truth fully. The store, filled with unsuspecting customers, had become the setting for a lesson in dignity, courage, and the power of remaining composed in the face of unjust accusations. The officers were about to discover that professionalism and calm authority could overpower bias and assumption, and the next moments would determine the outcome of this tense confrontation. The tension inside the store reached its peak as the two officers prepared to conduct the body search. The FBI officer remained calm, her mind fully alert and focused on every detail of the situation. She knew the slightest wrong word or movement could escalate the incident, but she was prepared. Her training had taught her to remain composed and strategic in moments of high stress, and she was about to put it into practice. With careful, deliberate movements, she reached into her bag and slowly pulled out her badge and identification. The metal glinted under the store lights as she held it out in front of her, ensuring the officers could see it clearly. She spoke slowly and firmly. "I'm an FBI agent. You can verify my credentials immediately. I have done nothing wrong, and your actions are based on assumption and bias." The officers froze. Their eyes widened as they recognized the badge. Their confident, forceful demeanor evaporated instantly, replaced by shock and confusion. One officer took a step back, his face pale, as if the weight of the realization had hit him physically. The other officer's hands trembled slightly as he glanced at his partner, unsure how to respond. Their earlier aggression had been based entirely on a false assumption, and now the truth was laid bare. The FBI officer remained composed, her voice calm but authoritative. "You are accusing me of a crime I did not commit. This is not only unprofessional but illegal. I expect an apology and for this situation to be corrected immediately." She did not raise her voice, but her words carried power. Her calm authority contrasted sharply with the officer's flustered state, making it clear who was in control. The surrounding customers, who had been watching and recording, whispered among themselves. Some murmured in astonishment, noting the sudden shift in the officer's demeanor. The store, which had felt tense and uncomfortable, now seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how the situation would unfold. The presence of witnesses added an additional layer of accountability, making it impossible for the officers to continue their actions without facing public scrutiny. One of the officers stammered, trying to explain himself. We didn't know, we thought." His words trailed off and he looked helplessly at his partner. The other officer remained silent, still visibly shaken. The FBI officer did not interrupt, allowing them to feel the full weight of their mistake. She knew that confrontation and humiliation were not necessary. The realization of their error would be enough. The store manager, who had been observing from a short distance, approached cautiously. He nodded to the FBI officer, silently acknowledging her professionalism and composure. He also moved closer to the officers, subtly signaling that the situation needed to be resolved quickly and properly. The manager understood that this incident could escalate into something far more serious if not handled with care. The FBI officer spoke again, her tone firm and unwavering. "You have falsely accused me, violated my rights, and acted on bias. I expect this to be corrected immediately, and I will be reporting this incident to your supervisors and the proper authorities." She paused, letting her words sink in. The officers' pale faces showed that the gravity of her statement was beginning to register. One of the officers, finally finding his voice, muttered an apology, though it sounded forced and uncertain. "I'm sorry, Agent. We didn't know." He stopped, realizing that his words were insufficient. The other officer remained silent, clearly overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Their initial confidence had completely crumbled under the undeniable truth of her identity. The FBI officer maintained eye contact, ensuring that they understood the seriousness of their actions. "Your apology is noted, but it does not undo what happened. You will be held accountable for this misconduct. You are obligated to follow proper procedure and act professionally in the future." Her words were calm, but they carried the weight of authority and justice. The surrounding customers began to murmur more audibly, some expressing surprise at the situation, while others whispered praise for the officer's composed handling of the incident. A few recorded the moment when the badge was revealed, capturing the officer's shocked reactions and the undeniable display of calm authority by the FBI agent. The atmosphere shifted from tension to a mix of astonishment and admiration for her ability to manage the situation without aggression. The officers, now fully aware of the mistake they had made, attempted to regain their composure. One of them cleared his throat, glancing at his partner, and then at the FBI officer. "We will handle this properly," he said, his tone lacking the previous confidence. The other officer simply nodded, still pale and uncertain. Their actions had been based on bias, and the revelation of her identity had exposed the error in a way that left them visibly shaken. The FBI officer's demeanor remained professional and composed. She knew that the situation was delicate, and she wanted to ensure it concluded without further conflict. "You are now aware of your error," she said. "I expect this to be reported to your supervisors, and I will be providing a full account of this incident. Your actions will be reviewed and addressed accordingly." Her calm but firm approach left no room for evasion or excuse. The store manager, recognizing the shift in control, stepped forward slightly. "Let's ensure this is handled properly and professionally," he said, his voice neutral but firm. He positioned himself subtly between the officers and the customers, creating a buffer that allowed the FBI officer to maintain authority while ensuring that the situation remained contained and calm. The FBI officer took a slow, deliberate breath, maintaining her composure. She had handled the initial confrontation, and now the revelation of her identity had completely shifted the dynamic. The officers were visibly shaken, and the presence of witnesses ensured accountability. She knew that the next steps would involve reporting and ensuring that the misconduct was officially addressed. But in this moment, she focused on maintaining professionalism and control. The officers, now pale and subdued, followed her lead in moving back toward the main area of the store. Their earlier aggression was replaced by caution and uncertainty. The FBI officer observed every step, ensuring that there was no further escalation. She remained calm and composed, her body language and voice signaling authority and control. Customers began to resume their activities, though some continued to watch from a distance, whispering among themselves. The tension in the store had eased, replaced by a mixture of curiosity, surprise, and admiration for the FBI officer's handling of the situation. Some of the recordings on phones would later circulate, capturing the moment when calm professionalism overcame false assumptions and bias. The FBI officer addressed the officers one final time before they left the back area. "This incident will be formally reported. I expect accountability and professionalism from you in the future. Your actions today were unacceptable, and I will make sure they are reviewed thoroughly." Her voice was calm, firm, and unwavering, leaving no room for misunderstanding. The officers nodded, pale and subdued, clearly aware that their actions had been inappropriate, and that the consequences were inevitable. They were no longer in control. The power dynamic had shifted entirely, and the FBI officer's composed handling of the situation had made that clear. The store manager approached the FBI officer once more, offering a quiet acknowledgement. "Thank you for handling this calmly," he said. "It could have escalated further, but you kept everything under control." She nodded politely, appreciating the acknowledgement but staying focused on the next steps she would take to ensure accountability. The FBI officer then gathered her items and prepared to leave the store, maintaining a calm and professional demeanor. The officers followed quietly, aware that their actions were under scrutiny and that any further misstep would have immediate consequences. The surrounding customers continued to watch, some quietly expressing admiration for her composure and courage. As she exited the store, she reflected on the encounter. It was a stark reminder of how prejudice and assumption could influence behavior, even among those sworn to protect the public. She also recognized the importance of remaining calm, composed, and assertive in moments of injustice. Her professional training had guided her through the confrontation, and she had handled the situation with dignity and authority. The ordinary shopping trip had transformed into a powerful lesson in courage, professionalism, and the importance of standing firm against false accusations. The FBI officer had faced prejudice head-on, revealing her identity at the right moment and ensuring that justice and accountability would follow. The officers had been exposed to the reality of their bias, and the presence of witnesses ensured that their actions would not go unnoticed. The store returned to its normal rhythm, but the impact of the encounter lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. The FBI officer's calm authority, strategic thinking, and courage in the face of bias had left a lasting impression. It was a moment that demonstrated the power of professionalism, composure, and the importance of standing up for what is right, even in unexpected and challenging circumstances. The store was now quiet in comparison to the earlier chaos, but the tension between the FBI officer and the two uniformed police officers remained thick. Even after revealing her identity, the situation was far from over. The officers, still pale and shaken, were aware that their actions had been completely inappropriate. They avoided direct eye contact, their previous authority and confidence replaced by guilt and uncertainty. The FBI officer, however, maintained her calm, professional demeanor, knowing that the confrontation had shifted, but that accountability was still required. The FBI officer addressed the officers again, her voice steady and authoritative. You have falsely accused me, acted on prejudice, and attempted to conduct a search without proper verification. Your behavior is unacceptable and must be reported to your supervisors immediately. You will be held accountable for this misconduct. Her words carried weight, commanding respect while remaining measured and professional. The first officer, still trembling slightly, muttered a hesitant apology. I didn't realize. We didn't know who you were. I'm sorry. The second officer remained silent, his hands fidgeting at his sides, clearly overwhelmed. The apology seemed insufficient, and the FBI officer knew she had to make it clear that acknowledgement alone was not enough. The officers had not just made a mistake. They had acted with bias and misuse of authority. She continued, her voice calm but firm, explaining the seriousness of their actions. Your assumptions were not only wrong but discriminatory. Accusing someone without evidence based on appearance or race is unacceptable. You must report this incident and face the proper consequences. This is not optional, and ignoring it could have serious legal and professional repercussions. She paused to let the words sink in. Her eyes locked on the officers, ensuring they understood the gravity of the situation. The surrounding customers and store staff continued to watch quietly, some still holding phones, others whispering among themselves. The FBI officer's calm authority and clear articulation had shifted the dynamic completely. Where there had once been aggression and tension, there was now discomfort and realization among the officers, and a growing admiration from witnesses for how professionally the situation was being handled. The FBI officer made sure to document everything in her mind, knowing that any official report she would file later needed to be accurate and precise. She had trained for situations that could escalate into danger or conflict, and although this was not violent, it was high stakes. The potential for public embarrassment, misuse of authority, and racial bias made it critical to stay composed and strategic. Every word she spoke and every movement she made was intentional, reinforcing her authority and the seriousness of the incident. The first officer, still pale, attempted to regain some semblance of composure. He took a small step forward, muttering, "We'll report this to our supervisors." The FBI officer raised her hand slightly, stopping him. You will report exactly what happened, including your bias and false assumptions, not just that the incident occurred. You will be fully accountable for your actions. This is a serious matter and it must be addressed properly. Her tone left no room for ambiguity. She was not asking for a simple acknowledgement. She demanded responsibility. The second officer, now visibly shaken, nodded silently, unable to speak. The FBI officer recognized the fear and realization in his eyes. Knowing he understood the seriousness of what had occurred, she continued to speak calmly, ensuring that both officers were clear on their obligations and the consequences of their actions. This is not a minor mistake. Misconduct and prejudice in law enforcement are taken seriously, and ignoring this would be a further violation of trust and law. Your actions will be scrutinized, and proper disciplinary measures will follow. The store manager, who had been observing closely, approached the group once more. Let's ensure this is handled appropriately, he said quietly, acknowledging the officer's authority while also signaling to the two officers that the situation needed to be resolved professionally. The FBI officer nodded, appreciating the support, while keeping her focus on ensuring accountability. The FBI officer's demeanor remained composed and calm, which contrasted sharply with the officer's obvious discomfort. She had shifted from responding to false accusations to guiding them on how to correct their misconduct. Her strategy was effective. She maintained authority without anger, conveyed the seriousness of their actions, and ensured that the officers understood the consequences of bias and false assumptions. As the conversation continued, the FBI officer made it clear that she would not allow this incident to be brushed aside. I will be providing a full report to your department, outlining every detail of what happened, including your assumptions and bias. This will be reviewed thoroughly and actions will be taken. You must cooperate fully and ensure that the truth is communicated accurately. Her words were calm yet commanding, emphasizing responsibility and transparency. The officers, now pale and subdued, nodded silently, understanding that the FBI agent's calm and professional handling of the incident had completely shifted the power dynamic. Their earlier assumptions and confidence had crumbled, and they were now fully aware of the consequences of their actions. The weight of accountability settled on them, making it clear that this would not be forgotten or ignored. The FBI officer then turned her attention slightly to the surrounding witnesses, her tone neutral but firm. You may have observed this incident, and your testimony may be needed if an investigation occurs. Please understand that what you saw is part of a larger issue concerning accountability and proper conduct. Witnesses like you ensure that actions are transparent and that justice can be served. She acknowledged the importance of public presence without calling attention to herself unnecessarily, reinforcing the transparency of the situation. The officers shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their actions had been witnessed and potentially documented. The presence of customers recording the incident only increased the likelihood that their misconduct would be addressed appropriately. The FBI officer understood this dynamic, using it subtly to reinforce the necessity of their compliance and honesty moving forward. After several minutes, the officers finally seemed to regain a fraction of their composure. The first officer spoke again, this time with more clarity. We understand and we will report everything as it happened. The FBI officer nodded, acknowledging the statement, but remaining watchful. She needed to ensure that their commitment was genuine and complete, not just a superficial response. She continued, explaining the importance of reflection and correction. It is not enough to report this incident. You must understand why it was wrong, why bias cannot dictate actions, and how to prevent similar incidents in the future. Accountability is not just reporting, it is learning and correcting behavior. Her voice remained calm, but the firmness in her words emphasized the importance of responsibility and professionalism. The store manager observed the interaction quietly, impressed by the FBI officer's ability to maintain control, guide the conversation, and ensure that the officers were being held accountable. The atmosphere had shifted completely from the initial tension and aggression to a scene of instruction and correction, highlighting the effectiveness of calm authority and professional conduct. The FBI officer spoke one final time before concluding the immediate interaction. I will provide a full account of this incident to your supervisors and ensure that all details, including bias and misconduct, are addressed. You will be held accountable, and I expect full cooperation. Any attempt to downplay or misrepresent this incident will be noted and addressed. Her voice was firm, leaving no room for misunderstanding, while her demeanor remained composed and professional. The officers, visibly shaken, nodded silently. The realization of the seriousness of their actions had fully sunk in. They understood that this incident was not a minor error, but a clear example of misconduct influenced by bias. The presence of witnesses, the officer's authority, and her calm yet commanding handling of the situation had made the consequences unmistakable. The FBI officer gathered her belongings, ready to leave the back area of the store. The officers followed quietly, subdued and aware of the gravity of the situation. The store had returned to a semblance of normalcy, though the memory of the confrontation lingered among the customers who had witnessed it. Many would likely remember the scene for a long time, a powerful example of professionalism and accountability in the face of bias. As she moved toward the exit, she reflected on the events that had unfolded. The encounter had been a reminder of the challenges that arise when assumptions and prejudice guide actions, even among law enforcement professionals. It had also demonstrated the importance of remaining calm, composed and strategic in high-pressure situations, using authority and professionalism to guide outcomes toward accountability and justice. The FBI officer exited the store, leaving the officers behind, their faces still pale and subdued. The ordinary shopping trip had transformed into a significant lesson in courage, professionalism, and the consequences of bias. The officers had been confronted with the reality of their actions, and witnesses had observed a powerful demonstration of calm authority prevailing over unjust accuse. After the immediate confrontation in the store had ended, the FBI officer knew that the incident was far from over. She had handled the situation professionally and asserted her authority effectively, but the next step was to ensure that proper reporting and investigation took place. She left the store calmly, aware that her actions in the following hours would be just as important as those in the store. Once outside, she took a deep breath and collected her thoughts. The air was crisp, and the sounds of the city seemed to contrast sharply with the tension she had just experienced inside the store. She reflected on how quickly a simple errand had escalated due to prejudice and false assumptions. She knew that such incidents, if left unchecked, could have serious consequences for the individuals involved and for public trust in law enforcement. Her mind was already organizing the details she would need for her report. She called her office to notify them of the incident and to begin the official documentation. Speaking calmly and clearly, she described the events in detail: the initial false accusation, the officer's behavior, the presence of witnesses, and how she had revealed her identity. She emphasized that the officer's actions had been racially motivated and that they had attempted to conduct a search without verification or legal justification. Her report would be thorough, leaving no room for ambiguity or misinterpretation. The officers, meanwhile, were left to process the experience in the store. Their initial confidence, based on false assumptions and prejudice, had been completely dismantled. They had faced the undeniable authority and professionalism of an FBI agent, and the realization of their misconduct weighed heavily on them. One officer paced quietly in the back room, running a hand through his hair while the other stood near a wall staring at the floor. The shock and embarrassment were evident, but so was the growing understanding of the seriousness of their actions. Back at her office, the FBI officer began writing her formal report. She recounted every detail meticulously, noting the sequence of events, the behavior of the officers, the reactions of the witnesses, and her own responses. She included observations about how the officers' actions were influenced by bias and assumptions, emphasizing that their behavior violated professional standards and legal obligations. Her writing was clear, factual, and precise, designed to provide an accurate account that would withstand scrutiny during the investigation. She also reached out to the store manager to gather any additional statements or evidence, including security camera footage. The manager had been cooperative and acknowledged the professionalism and composure with which she had handled the incident. The manager confirmed that he had observed the officer's behavior and was willing to provide a statement. This additional evidence would be crucial in supporting the FBI officer's report and ensuring accountability. The FBI officer understood that public perception and witness accounts were also important. She contacted a few of the customers who had witnessed the confrontation and were willing to provide statements. Many had recorded videos on their phones capturing the pivotal moment when she revealed her identity. These recordings and statements would serve as an objective record of the incident, highlighting the officer's behavior and her calm, professional handling of the situation. Her mind was also focused on the broader implications. She knew that incidents like these were not isolated. They reflected systemic issues within law enforcement that needed to be addressed. By documenting and reporting the incident thoroughly, she could contribute to accountability and help prevent similar occurrences in the future. She reflected on how bias, unchecked assumptions, and misuse of authority could harm individuals and undermine trust in the system, and she was determined to ensure that justice would be served in this case. As the hours passed, the formal investigation began. Supervisors from the police department were notified, and the officers involved were placed on administrative leave pending review. The FBI officer cooperated fully with investigators, providing her detailed report, witness statements, and the video evidence. She answered questions clearly, maintaining her professional composure, and emphasized the importance of accountability and transparency. The investigation revealed the full extent of the officers' misconduct. Their actions had been based entirely on bias without any evidence or justification. The internal review concluded that they had violated professional standards and legal obligations, and appropriate disciplinary measures were taken. The FBI officers' thorough documentation and composed handling of the incident had ensured that justice was served, demonstrating the power of professionalism and calm authority in the face of misconduct. Throughout the process, the FBI officer continued her normal duties, but the incident remained in her thoughts. She reflected on the importance of remaining vigilant and composed when confronted with bias or false assumptions. She also considered the broader lessons for the public and for law enforcement professionals, that accountability, professionalism, and calm authority were essential in maintaining trust and justice. The story of the incident eventually reached other law enforcement professionals and the public. It became an example of how to handle bias and misconduct effectively, highlighting the importance of standing firm, maintaining composure, and ensuring accountability. The FBI officer's approach, calm, professional, and strategic, was praised and studied as a model for dealing with similar situations. For the officers involved, the consequences were significant. They faced formal reprimands, required training on bias and professional conduct, and their actions were officially documented in their personnel files. The experience served as a powerful reminder of the importance of ethical behavior, impartiality, and professionalism in law enforcement. The store, too, reflected on the incident. Policies were reviewed and reinforced to ensure that employees knew how to handle situations involving suspicion of theft or misconduct. The presence of professional guidance and clear procedures helped prevent similar confrontations in the future. The incident became a teaching moment for the community, demonstrating the importance of handling disputes and accusations with care, respect, and adherence to the law. The FBI officer, having seen the process through from start to finish, felt a sense of resolution. She had faced a challenging situation, maintained her professionalism, and ensured that accountability was upheld. The incident reinforced her commitment to justice and the importance of standing firm against bias, both personally and within the broader community. Through it all, she remained calm and composed, embodying the principles of authority and responsibility. The experience became a testament to the power of professionalism, clarity, and measured action. She had turned a potentially dangerous confrontation into an example of how to handle bias, misconduct, and false accusations with dignity and effectiveness. In the end, the FBI officer's actions demonstrated that standing firm, speaking clearly, and maintaining composure could overcome prejudice and ensure justice. The incident was a reminder that accountability and professionalism were not just ideals, but necessary practices that could influence positive change, protect individuals, and reinforce trust in law enforcement and public institutions alike. The days following the incident were filled with careful reflection, communication, and follow-up actions for the FBI officer. Even though the immediate confrontation in the store had ended, she knew that the work of ensuring accountability and preventing further misconduct was just beginning. She approached the situation with the same calm, professional focus that had guided her through the encounter itself. She spent the first day organizing all the evidence she had gathered: her written account, witness statements, and the videos recorded by customers. Each piece of information was cataloged and prepared for submission to the appropriate authorities. She wanted to make sure that nothing could be overlooked or misrepresented. The meticulous preparation was essential to demonstrate the complete picture of what had occurred and to highlight the officer's bias-driven actions. During the process, she also contacted the police department's internal affairs office. She requested that a formal investigation be opened into the conduct of the officers, outlining the sequence of events and the actions that had led to her false accusation. She explained that this investigation was not just about her own experience, but about addressing a broader issue of prejudice and misconduct in law enforcement. Her calm, precise presentation left no room for doubt about the seriousness of the matter. As the investigation proceeded, the officers were temporarily removed from active duty. They were instructed to cooperate fully with the review, and their conduct was scrutinized closely. The FBI officer remained available to provide detailed testimony and clarification if needed. She understood that her role now extended beyond the incident itself. It was about ensuring that justice was upheld and that lessons could be learned from the situation. The store management also took steps to formalize their account of the incident. The manager provided a written statement describing what he had witnessed, including the officer's aggressive behavior, the presence of witnesses, and how the situation had shifted once her identity was revealed. He also submitted security footage from the store's cameras, which captured the confrontation in detail. The manager's cooperation reinforced the FBI officer's case and ensured that there was a clear, factual record of the events. Meanwhile, the community began to take notice. The incident, though private in its initial occurrence, highlighted important issues related to bias and false assumptions in law enforcement. The FBI officer recognized that sharing her experience in a responsible and factual way could provide insight and guidance to others in similar positions. She worked carefully to ensure that any public communication was professional, focused on accountability and fairness, and did not violate privacy or security protocols. She also took time to reach out to some of the witnesses who had recorded videos and provided statements. She thanked them for their integrity and willingness to participate in the investigation, emphasizing the importance of accurate and honest accounts. Their cooperation would be critical in maintaining transparency and ensuring that the officers' actions were fully understood. As the investigation progressed, the officers were interviewed in detail. They were asked to recount their actions, the reasoning behind their decisions, and their awareness of proper procedures. The FBI officers' documentation and the witness accounts were compared with their statements, revealing inconsistencies and confirming that bias had influenced their behavior. The presence of objective evidence made it clear that the misconduct had occurred and that appropriate action needed to follow. The investigation concluded with formal disciplinary measures for the officers. Both were reprimanded for their actions, required to complete additional training on bias and professional conduct, and documented in their personnel files. The outcome demonstrated that accountability was enforced, and it highlighted the importance of adherence to proper procedures, impartiality, and professional behavior. Throughout this process, the FBI officer continued to reflect on the broader implications. She considered how easily prejudice and assumptions could lead to unjust treatment, and how important it was for individuals to maintain composure and professionalism in the face of such challenges. She also thought about the role of witnesses and community members in ensuring transparency and accountability, recognizing that public awareness could serve as a safeguard against misconduct. She shared her reflections in internal professional discussions, emphasizing key lessons: the importance of verifying information before taking action, the necessity of addressing bias, and the value of maintaining calm and authoritative communication. Her insights were well received and contributed to ongoing discussions about best practices and ethics in law, enforcement, and public service. The incident also prompted the store to review its own policies and procedures. Staff received additional guidance on handling situations involving suspicion of theft or other misconduct. Clear instructions were put in place to ensure that future incidents could be managed safely, professionally, and without unnecessary escalation. The combination of external accountability and internal improvements helped create a safer, more respectful environment for both staff and customers. For the FBI officer, the experience reinforced the importance of preparation, composure, and strategic action. She had faced a stressful and unjust situation, yet she managed to maintain her dignity and assert her authority effectively. Her calm response not only protected herself, but also ensured that the officer's misconduct was addressed and corrected. The incident became an example of how professionalism and integrity could prevail, even in moments of intense pressure and unfair treatment. In reflecting on the entire experience, she recognized the lessons for both individuals and institutions. Bias and false assumptions could have serious consequences, but careful documentation, calm communication, and adherence to legal and ethical standards could mitigate harm and promote accountability. She also understood the importance of supporting witnesses and bystanders in their role of observing and recording events responsibly, as their actions could help ensure that justice was served. Over time, the FBI officer returned to her routine duties, carrying with her the insights and experiences gained from the incident. She remained committed to upholding the principles of fairness, accountability, and professionalism in all her interactions. Her handling of the confrontation had set an example for colleagues, the community, and the public at large, demonstrating that integrity, composure, and strategic action could overcome prejudice and misconduct. The officers involved in the incident continued to face the consequences of their actions, serving as a reminder to others about the importance of professionalism and the serious nature of bias-driven behavior. The experience left a lasting impression on them, highlighting the necessity of reflection, accountability, and correction. The story of the incident eventually became part of broader discussions on law enforcement practices, community engagement, and professional conduct. It served as a case study for how to manage difficult situations with calm authority, how to address misconduct effectively, and how to maintain dignity and professionalism in the face of false accusations. The lessons extended beyond the immediate participants, providing insight and guidance for anyone involved in situations of authority, responsibility, and public service. In the end, the FBI officers' composed and professional handling of the incident not only resolved the immediate conflict, but also contributed to greater awareness, accountability, and understanding. Her actions ensured that justice was upheld, misconduct was addressed, and lessons were learned by both the officers involved and the broader community. The experience demonstrated that courage, professionalism, and a commitment to ethical behavior could turn a potentially damaging situation into a powerful example of integrity, authority, and the importance of standing firm in the face of prejudice.